What's up guys, it's me, Daniel, back with a brand new video. Today I want to review Ratchet and Clank Going Commando. If you've ever played the first game, you should know that it's far from perfect. While the first Ratchet and Clank game is one of my favorite games of all time, it's not without its flaws. Ratchet and Clank 2 is a huge improvement from the first game in almost every single way. The game was released in November of 2003, almost a year after the first game was released. The developers were so confident in the first game that a sequel was greenlit 5 months before the first game was even released. To be honest, I feel like these 5 months could have been better spent on perfecting the first game. As I already mentioned, the original game was not without its flaws, and I admit the developers wouldn't have had much time to make the game any better, but they could have easily improved the graphics and even fixed a few glitches here and there. I've always wondered what the original games would have been like if they were given at least a few years to complete each title, rather than rushing them out in only 12 months. All 3 of the original games were developed 1 year after the other, and I really think they should have been given a bit more time on each game. The funny thing is, other game developers are usually given more time than this to complete a game, and yet for some reason this would often result in a rushed product filled to the brim with glitches, even though they've been given several years to develop the game. For some reason, the team and Insomniac are able to rush out a perfectly good game in only 12 months without even breaking a sweat. Honestly, it's amazing they're able to create games of this quality within only a year. So you really gotta hand it to the people at Insomniac. They know what they're doing. So if they were given a lot more time to complete each game, they could have honestly created a masterpiece. Now that we've gotten the intro out of the way, let's get on with the review. The story takes place a year after the events of the first game, where both Ratchet and Clank are being interviewed on a show called Behind the Hero. Before the interview is even over, the duo both find themselves teleported away to a spaceship where they are greeted by Abercrombie Fizzwidget, the founder and CEO of Megacorp. Megacorp is the largest manufacturer of weapons and gadgets in the entire galaxy. In the first game, it was a different company called Gadgetron. Gadgetron vendors are what Ratchet would use to purchase new weapons in the first game. However, in this game, Ratchet and Clank are in the Bogon Galaxy, where people would usually purchase Megacorp weapons instead of Gadgetron. Anyway, Mr. Fizzwidget enlists the help of Ratchet and Clank to recover a stolen biological experiment from their testing facility. The experiment is called the Protopet. The Protopets are small, blue furry creatures genetically engineered by the people at Megacorp to create the perfect pet. The Protopet was stolen by a mysterious masked thief, who, as it turns out, was secretly a female Lombax named Angela Cross, who used to work for Megacorp as a scientist. As it turns out, the Protopets are highly dangerous creatures that pose a threat to the entire galaxy. Angela stole the experiment to stop Megacorp from mass producing them. In the end, they find out that Mr. Fizzwidget was secretly Captain Quark the entire time. Quark's plan was to unleash Protopets upon the galaxy, so that he could use a device created by Angela to defeat the creatures so that people will forgive him for his evil wrongdoings, thus making himself a hero once again. This game has a pretty interesting plot, but I feel like the first game had the better story. When Captain Quark betrayed Ratchet and Clank in the first game, Ratchet blamed Clank for leading them both into a trap. When I originally played the first game as a kid, I couldn't help but feel a lot of emotion for both these characters. They went through a lot of trouble to find Captain Quark, only to find out that he was secretly working for Drek, and Ratchet was emotionally hurt that he was tricked by Quark. I really feel that what makes the story better in the first game is the argument between Ratchet and Clank. And when Ratchet finally forgave Clank for what happened, I really felt a lot of emotion. And I really feel like it built a lot of chemistry between both these characters. So what I really think the story is missing in Going Commando is the emotion between the characters in the first game. Now, obviously, if the writers decided to replicate the story from the first game, then it would really feel like the same thing all over again. I'm not saying the game necessarily needs to have an emotional story, but if they could have found a way to include some emotion in the story while still telling a unique story that's different from the first game, then perhaps it might have made for a better story. One thing that Ratchet & Clank 2 does better than the first game would have to be the levels. The levels in Ratchet & Clank 2 are way larger than the first game. But despite the levels being bigger, I still feel very nostalgic for the levels in the original game. For some reason, there's nothing quite like running around the levels in the original game. Planets like Novalis, Kerwan, and Veldin simply can't be replicated in the other games. I don't know if it's the nostalgia, but there's something about the levels of the first game that just make them better, despite the fact that they're not as large as the second game. Let's take Poketaru, for example. Some of the other games have their own levels similar to Poketaru, but none of them even come close to perfection. They just don't quite stack up. It's not like the developers are doing anything wrong, they just don't quite know how to capture the heart of the original game. The levels in Ratchet & Clank 2 might not be as good, but the weapons in this game are way more powerful and more fun to use. I'd have to say that out of all the games in the series, the first Ratchet & Clank game had the least powerful weapons. The problem with the weapons in the first game is they really just don't pack a punch like in the second game. My favorite weapon in Ratchet & Clank 2 would have to be the mini rocket tube. Out of all the weapons in the game, I use this one the most. It's very powerful. You can take out just about anything with this gun. So I definitely recommend buying this weapon over anything else. Another really good weapon in the game would have to be the Bouncer. This weapon has been featured in several other games in this series. You can practically blow up anything in your path with this weapon. So it's no surprise the Bouncer was featured in so many other titles. The Blitz gun is also a fairly powerful weapon, but it's not very useful for long-range attacks. The Blitz gun isn't very powerful until you level it up all the way. It's a good weapon, but it's not very strong. Just like in the first game, Clank is also a playable character. He still has the ability to control other robots to fight for him, but this time he can also control different kinds of robots, each with different capabilities. There's a bridge bot which can be used to create bridges to cross large gaps. The hammer bot is used for smashing large objects, and the lift bot is used for lifting large objects that block your path. Clank's capabilities are definitely a big improvement over the first game. Clank is also more capable of defending himself against larger foes compared to the first game. In the first game, Clank almost can't defend himself at all without the help of the other robots. Despite a few minor problems, this game is an absolute joy to play. Honestly, they just don't make games like this anymore. Platforms just aren't as popular as they used to be, and a good game like this is hard to come by. Honestly, this game is nearly 20 years old, and I still never really get tired of it. The game definitely deserves a 10 out of 10. I just couldn't recommend this game enough. Well, that's about it for today's video. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.